There's over 500 people in Lebanon that have been killed. I think it's around 133 or more civilians. South Lebanon has been destroyed by Israeli aggression largely, to the point that, I reported back in March, and there's been forthcoming reporting on this as well, that there's been an attempt to create essentially a buffer zone in southern Lebanon that includes destroying the agriculture, the ability to grow crops. Some have called it ecocide, and then politically, socially, economically, this complete effort to make the area uninhabitable and unlivable. Well, as far as I'm aware, there was an agreement, or there was a proposal back in May that seemed to placate both sides to a certain extent. That would have involved withdrawals of Israeli troops from Gaza, among other provisions. The thing was, it got quite close, but it never quite crossed the line. And then supposedly Netanyahu added in 4 new provisions that he called non-negotiables. I think this happened around early June. So in this point now, we're trying to come to an agreement where neither side seems able to get exactly what they want, despite the fact that we were quite close. Israeli officials have come out and said, or Israeli negotiators rather, have come out and said that Netanyahu's obstinance has been a big impediment. We've also heard this from Hamas officials, basically saying that they felt that they were close, that the agreement was very close. I think everyone around, including the Biden administration, was quite positive about the prospects of reaching an agreement. And then with these new provisions, it seems to be like a sort of step too far. Among these provisions are the fact that Israel wants to maintain military forces in both the Philadelphia corridor towards the south, which borders Egypt, which the Egyptians, who are part of the negotiations, also have a problem with, as well as the Netzerim corridor, which splits North and South Gaza. Now, the Israelis claim that by doing that, they can monitor militants that go from north to south. I think Palestinians are fearful that this will leave Israeli occupation, Israeli boots essentially on Gazan territory. So these are some of the big impasses, as well as the fact that Netanyahu doesn't want to agree to a stopping of fighting completely until he's achieved his military objectives, which has been stated by multiple Israeli officials. They want to completely dismantle, destroy, if you will, Hamas, which has been said both by Israeli security as well as, a number of Palestinian and international, I guess we could call them neutral observers, that this is not a likely or really feasible task to occur. So I mean, the thing regarding the negotiations, the ceasefire negotiations, and how those are impacted elsewhere, Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah said that part of their actions on Sunday were connected to, wider operations with their allies in the region, including Iran, various other Iranian-affiliated resistance groups, which assumably would also include Hamas, who have that connection to this, what they call themselves as the axis of resistance. While they're not entirely unconnected, Hamas is responsible for Gaza. While they do have, something of a presence in other parts of, I guess we could say in other parts of Palestine and the West Bank, or support in some places, it's not ran the same way that it is in Gaza. So that being said, Israeli actions there might have more to do with internal considerations than just ceasefire negotiations, or or trying to gain an upper hand in Hamas, let's say. Yeah, I mean, this has been a fear for, people in the region since soon after October 7, on October 8, when Hezbollah started engaging, the area south of the Lebanese border in northern Israel. So currently, I think there's about 60,000 people from northern Israel that have been displaced. In South Lebanon, that figure is about 97,000, I think, at the time of speaking. There's been fear that a wider war that would engulf the entirety of both countries, as well as potentially kicking off something in the wider region. Nasrallah has spoken in the past about different allies, groups in Iraq, in Yemen, potentially in Syria, that could become involved if a war, the already existing war that is taking place between Israel and Hezbollah expands beyond just the current rules of engagement, which until now has stuck predominantly to southern Lebanon, though there have been a number of attacks in eastern Lebanon, as well as a couple in the southern suburbs of Beirut. Apparently, Reuters reported that both Israeli and Hezbollah officials had made overtures that, Sunday was as far as they wanted to go for the moment. Now, if that, if this front kicks off again in the future, that it's within the realm of possibility. Just today, Israel hit a target in Syria that included a Hezbollah official, a Hezbollah member. We're still waiting for more news to that effect. But yes, a full-on war is still a possibility. The response on Sunday was supposedly from Hezbollah's part connected to the Israeli assassination in the southern suburbs of Beirut of a Hezbollah commander called Fuad Shukr. The connection to Ismail Haniyeh has not taken place yet, as far as public statements have come from Hezbollah. That will be up to Iran. Apparently, the Iranians are sending out notes and working diplomatically to try to figure out a way to do this, but have reserved the option to respond here. So there's a lot still up in the air. There's a lot that we don't know. Making kind of wide-ranging assessments might not be the most responsible thing, but I think until now there's a lot of essentially all things are possible. Yeah, from what analysts have been telling me, the thing is, until now, Hezbollah and Iran have tried to establish a level of deterrence. And the question is, how effective has that been? Was Sunday an effective act of deterrence or not? And I don't think we know quite yet. What a number of analysts have told me is that as long as the United States continues to ship offensive weapons to Israel, and as long as the Israelis are allowed to act with impunity in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iran to effect, until they're held accountable, until this impunity is overturned, that there is no real deterrence, because the Israelis know that they have a constant backer. They know that they have the world's largest military superpower, in fact, probably history's largest military superpower, behind them to support them, to guard them from accountability in the UN Security Council, and to continue to provide them arms and funding to continue their war efforts on these various fronts. That's a great question, and thank you for giving me the space to share it. As these things play out, I think it's important to keep the human effect in mind. There are over 40,000 dead in Gaza today. Since October 7, there's over 660 Palestinians in the West Bank that have been killed. Obviously, we include civilians in Israel that have been included and that are going through hard times in this as well. There's over 500 people in Lebanon that have been killed. I think it's around 133 or more civilians. South Lebanon has been destroyed by Israeli aggression, largely, to the point that, I reported back in March, and there's been forthcoming reporting on this as well, that there's been an attempt to create essentially a buffer zone in southern Lebanon that includes destroying the agriculture, the ability to grow crops. Some have called it ecocide, and then politically, socially, economically, this complete effort to make the area uninhabitable and unlivable. I think in the last 10, 11 months, that's been the most significant thing that I've been able to report on, is that the people here are under enormous suffering. They're under a strain. Lebanon is already going through an economic crisis since 2019. You add on top of that the 2020 port explosion in Beirut, as well as the COVID-19 crisis, or pandemic, excuse me. And then, so putting all these things together, the Lebanese people are going through some very tough moments. The state is in no position to help the civilians, and then furthermore, people of the South have been almost completely forgotten, not just by the state, but also by the international institutions that we have available. Oftentimes, international media has undercovered or not covered, their struggles as well. So my, I guess, word to the world, to people, would be to turn and look at the people who are losing their lives in places like Palestine, and losing their livelihoods and lives in places like Lebanon as well.